When governments give up on governing with integrity, they give up on governing for Queenslanders. And what we have seen in the past 24 hours in the train shame scandal has been the biggest development to date. We now know that a cover-up existed right to the highest office in this state, and it existed for months before Queenslanders were told. A cover-up of $2.4 billion. A cover-up that only came to light because of persistent questioning, because of the estimates process, and because of revelations of the government not wanting to be open and honest with Queenslanders. Integrity matters to me and it matters to Queenslanders. And what we have seen this term of government is the government's credibility rotting when it comes to integrity. So today I affirm that an LNP government will have a Minister for Integrity, it will have a Minister for Customer Service, and it will have a Minister for Open Data to make sure that government belongs to Queenslanders. What we have seen in the months leading up to the train shame scandal is a government that has given up on integrity and is more obsessed with its image than how things are for everyday Queenslanders. The Premier dismissed the blowout, dismissed the cover-up on the basis of the worthiness of the project. That misses the point. The criticism is because a government has stopped treating taxpayers' money with respect and can write off $2.4 billion as just an oversight. The criticism is because of the length the government went to hide up its failings. That's where the criticism has been levelled. And in a moment, the Deputy Leader will unpack how many people knew, how deep the cover-up was, and how important this is for Queenslanders. But I want to explain what $2.4 billion could give in a cost of living crisis to Queenslanders. $2.4 billion could pay the rent for around 80,000 Queenslanders for a year. It could pay the electricity for around 1.2 million Queenslanders for a year. It could have put over $440 cash in every Queenslander's pockets in the middle of a housing crisis, in the middle of a cost of living crisis. This is the consequences for a government that has given up on integrity and has given up on treating taxpayers' money with the respect it deserves. Jarrod.
Well, thank you, David. Good morning. Jarrod Bleijie, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. Well, in the train shame scandal, what we saw yesterday was the most significant development in this scandal, and that is the dodgy five, Premier Palaszczuk, Deputy Premier Miles, Treasurer Dick, Minister Grace and the man in the middle himself, Mark Bailey, signed off on this blowout on the 16th of May 2023 at a Cabinet Budget Review Committee. This is significant because this is weeks earlier than when the announcement was actually made, that now the cover-up continues and they're all ducking and weaving as to who knew what and who knew when. Well, the reality is Cameron Dick, the Treasurer, Minister Grace, Stephen Miles, the Deputy Premier, the Premier herself, Palaszczuk, and Mark Bailey sat around the Cabinet Budget Review Committee on the 16th of May, it's in Mark Bailey's diary, and they signed off on the $2.4 billion budget blowout for the train shame scandal. So the Premier confirmed yesterday that's when she found out. And that's why they have been so prepared to cover this up, because they did not want Queenslanders to know that it was weeks before the initial announcement was made where they all scrambled and deliberately hid and covered up the information about the blowout from the people of Queensland. They all wanted everyone to believe that this was just happening as we speak when the announcement was made within a matter of days. It's not the case. It's been exposed that's not the case. It was the 16th of May at a Cabinet Budget Review Committee meeting. Did they tell Cabinet then? After Cabinet Budget Review Committee met and made the decision on the 16th of May, did the Premier then take it to her Cabinet and tell the Cabinet Ministers about the $2.4 billion train shame scandal budget blowout? That's the questions other ministers have to answer. Did they know about it, or did the Premier keep it secret from her Cabinet colleagues just as she kept it secret from Queenslanders? Now, I've served in a Cabinet Budget Review Committee in government. This is a robust process, and this is why the Premier has been so reluctant to explain when she knew and what date she knew. That's why Mark Bailey said at budget estimates he can't recall when he told the Premier. He did not want to confirm it was at the Cabinet Budget Review Committee. Why? because the Cabinet Budget Review Committee has a whole process that is independent of government, and that's with the public service. And he knows he can't hide the facts. There would have been a Cabinet submission to the Cabinet Budget Review Committee. The Cabinet submission would have had the $2.4 billion budget blowout. Now, any Premier who chairs the Cabinet Budget Review Committee, any Premier worth her salt, would have grilled Mark Bailey on the matters, would have grilled Mark Bailey on the excuses for the $2.4 billion, to now we're having this $9.5 billion train shame scandal. Did she grill Mark Bailey? And then if she did, and she wasn't derelict in her duties, but if she did the job of the Premier and grilling her minister about the blowout, then there is no way the Premier can say she did not know about the $9.5 billion when she changed it to $7.1 billion for authorisation and publication across Queensland. It's quite clear now this web of lies has become so tangled, and every time the Premier and Mark Bailey open their mouths to the media, it gets murkier and murkier. It got murkier yesterday when the Premier was grilled about when the announcement was going to be made. And she said, well, it wasn't set yet, and we were still negotiating between departments and officers. Well, as we know, Mark Bailey said that wasn't the case. It was always intended the announcement was going to be made. He said that a month ago. Every time the Premier opens her mouth, the story changes. The cover-up is so deep it goes to the heart of the Premier and her government, and the integrity or lack of integrity in her government. The Premier of Queensland is using the dog ate my homework as an excuse for this budget blowout. But this case, it's the dog ate my $2.4 billion budget blowout announcement. That's the excuse that the Premier is. The Premier is refusing to sack Mark Bailey because she signed the deal. People have been asking us for the last... We have been talking about this constantly for weeks, and people on the streets have been asking to us, including at the Echo where I was there a couple of days ago. Members of the public are saying, how on earth does Mark Bailey still have a job? I say, great question. And now it was exposed yesterday. The reason Mark Bailey still has a job is because the Premier can't sack him because she was complicit in the cover-up. Absolutely complicit, and she is protecting Mark Bailey. So the leader of the state, the Premier, the leader of the Labor Party, is protecting the very minister that should be sacked and shown the door from Cabinet.